Hello people of YouTube, welcome to another TSW2 video. Today we're on the Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr route and we're going to be driving this rather boxy electric engine which is called the Deutsche-Bahn BR143 or just DB BR143. And we're currently at Duisburg Hauptbahnhof, and before I get any further I would like to apologise if I end up pronouncing place names wrong, as I am a bit of a novice when it comes to the German language. And that unit leaving there, that's a pair, I think that's a pair of, yeah, it's a pair of DB BR422s. This service that we're on now with the BR143 is RE1, which, if my research is correct, is a service that runs from Aachen Hauptbahnhof through to Hamm Westfalia Hauptbahnhof. And of course Aachen is probably best known to TSW players like myself as being the western end of the Schnellfahrstrecke Köln route, which comes with the base TSW2 package. Now, as it stands now, I don't really know, I'm still not really an expert on how to set up this locomotive, but what I do know is that it's a bit difficult to drive. Because this, you see this speed selector here? Oh, there's the horn. Yeah, you see the speed selector? That's essentially what this locomotive has as like its equivalent of a throttle, and it works in a very different way. So it's kind of like both a throttle and cruise control. And before I leave it any later, I'll set these marker lights. Close the doors. There we go. It's fine. I can just take all this up there.
Vorsicht bei der Einfahrt.
I have no idea what that announcement said. Anyway, let's get going. This locomotive, I should add, is hauling these Doppelstockwagen coaches, which are actually a fairly common sight on a lot of German routes in TSW. Just trying to work out what to do, as not really. As I keep saying, I'm not an expert on this locomotive. And if I'm not mistaken, the DB BR143 comes with, well, originally came with the Riesa Nord route, which I believe was Hagen to Finnentrop. Again, apologies if I get any pronunciation wrong. And more recently, Dovetail re-released it as part of the Nahverkehr Dresden route, otherwise known as Riesa to Dresden. So, I should add, of course, that this service that we're driving today is part of the RE1 service, but because this in-game route is so short, we'll only be covering the section between Duisburg and Bochum, stopping at Mülheim Hauptbahnhof, as you can see there, and later we'll also be calling it at Essen Hauptbahnhof and Wattenscheid. Speaking of Essen, I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but quite impressively, there's actually some old Docklands Light Railway electric trains that are now running on like the metro lines in Essen. And I think they're the original, is it P86 or P87 stock? All I know about their history in London is that they were the original DLR trains when the system opened in 1987. As for this BR143, I don't really know anything about their history. Come to think of it, there's a lot about the history of German railways that I just don't know about. Now, as is usually the case with these German passenger services, the timetable is quite tight, but I've already pretty much come to the realization that given how bad I am at driving this particular locomotive, that we probably won't run to time. Previously I have done this run with an EMU called the BR425, which is much easier to drive than this BR143. Not entirely sure what this auxiliary control lever is, or what it's for rather, but I'm thinking it's got something to do with like a booster, although as I say, I don't really know for certain, because I thought that this locomotive only had a top speed of 120 kilometres per hour. I'm actually struggling to see what these dials are saying when the instrument lights are on. Now that's the other thing I've just realised I need to focus on, is making sure I slow down for each station stop in time and I don't overrun the platform. So that'll be the last thing we need. And since it actually makes it a lot noisier, I think I'll leave these windows closed. So as I stated previously, this route that we're on is Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr, and it unfortunately is very short because it only includes, I think it's either, there's another set of Doppelstockwagen coaches and what looks like a pair of BR185/2s on a freight train. Yeah, as I was saying, this is the Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr route, which unfortunately is very short. Why are the dynamic brakes on? Anyway, from what I understand, this route was released about February 2020. Don't quote me on that. What I do know, at least, is that it includes it's either, I think it's about 35 kilometres of track between Duisburg and Bochum, which I believe is in the German state of North Rhine-Westfalia. Again, I could be totally wrong, because I'm not an expert on German railways and geography. Actually, that's a point. If any German people are watching, and if they know anything about, if they know a lot about how their railways work, do you actually, or do your drivers actually blast the horn? Because I know that there are obviously level crossings throughout the country. There's BR422, well, two BR422s. I know that there are level crossings in Germany, especially, like, I think there's a few somewhere between Cologne and Bonn. At least if what I saw in train simulations anything to go by. But even then, do you actually use, how often do you actually use the horns, if at all? Apologies, I've got a bit of a tickle in the throat today. Not sure what that's about. No, there's even more BR422s. Yeah, turns out we're actually earlier than I thought. Actually, that's a point. I wonder if those BR422s over there are the same ones that we saw leaving Duisburg. Ah, screw it. I know I've got the stopping point wrong, but I'd rather just stop here than risk being late. There we go. I can't read that destination display, but I think that lot's off to Solingen. It's loud. Here's me thinking electric locomotives are generally pretty quiet. There go the passengers. Now these NPCs are the subject of a lot of frustration from me, even though I'm well aware that they are just animated figures in a computer game that I have no control over. Even so, I still find it annoying when you're like trying to film a trainspotting video at any odd station, like, I don't know,
Bitte achten Sie auf den Abstand zwischen Zug und Bahnsteigkante.
Like, for example, I guess Kenton Junction on the Boston Sprinter route. Quite often, you'll have a nice shot lined up, but then suddenly, often just as the train is pulling in, or about to speed by, an NPC will come along and just stand right in your way. What's going on with this silly thing? Right, so I forgot how long this thing took to accelerate. Anyway, so now we're leaving Mülheim Hauptbahnhof, and the next stop is Essen Hauptbahnhof. And I don't know a lot about the German language and what all of the words mean in English, but I do know that Hauptbahnhof is German for central railway station, although I don't think it's that exact wording. It could be main station or something, but I honestly don't know. Incidentally, recently I was watching a video on YouTube where someone, unfortunately I've forgotten the channel name, was actually at Mülheim Hauptbahnhof filming like the S-Bahn Rhein-Ruhr and like RE1, RE4, and even like a couple of ice trains. Like at one point I think there was an ice 2, or no, it was an ice 1, because the ice 2 is the one that's only got the power car at one end and a cab car at the other end. You know, the ice 1 is a bit like the British Rail HST in that it's got a power car at both ends. So, even though this Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr route is very short and linear, as you can see, even though it does include that diversion line there, but even though it's very short, I do still enjoy driving on it, to be honest. I mean, yes, it is very short and the journey is often over faster than you realise, but at the same time, I have since taken quite a liking to German routes and locomotives, or in the case of the BR422 and BR425, multiple units. I don't really know, there's just something, I don't know if relaxing is the right word, considering how intense these timetables often are, but yeah, there's just something about this route that I always like. This locomotive is almost like a snail. I think next time I try driving on this route, it probably will just be either with that BR425 or the BR146, more specifically the BR146/2. Here's a bit of a strange thing. You can see on the destination display that says Bochum, but I think it should say RE1 to Hamm, Westfalia. And yeah, I'm not sure why it just says Bochum. But that's the other thing about this route, is that you often find yourself speeding along these, I don't know if undulating is the right word, but you often find yourself going around these big sweeping curves or going over or under flyovers, what have you. Now, I think I didn't realise it when I was setting up this run, but I think this is basically autumn or winter. I mean, it certainly looks like autumn if the colours of these trees is anything to go by. And yeah, I just thought, if any of you have actually been on a train between Duisburg and Bochum in real life, feel free to post in the comments what you think about this route and like how accurate this is. Because as I keep saying, I'm a complete novice when it comes to. I am a complete novice when it comes to the history of, or when it comes to what the German railways look like in real life. What's that engine on the other track? Oh, it's BR101. Without a cab car, because logic. Anyway, I believe this station is Essen Fronthausen, which is probably only, for all I know, it's probably only served by the S-Bahn trains and probably buses as well. I tend to find with the locals. big, well not necessarily big, but a lot of these other stations in Germany will do have bus connections as well. This station is Essen West, or Essen West, I believe. It looked like we're just over top of BR422. Speaking of which, this route does not come with the BR143 or the Doppelstockwagen coaches. It only comes with the BR422 and BR425 EMUs. There's a depot over there. And the I got the BR143 with Nahverkehr Dresden, since I don't have RC ignored. And I think I first got the Doppelstockwagen coaches with either Bahn or what else? They came with Dresden routes, except the Doppelstockwagen coaches in the Dresden pack have special like S-Bahn and VVO decals. And we're pulling into Essen Hauptbahnhof. And I'm pretty sure this station has got underground platforms where you can catch like the yellow U-Bahn, which is, I think it's with that weird texture glitch. There's another there's a BR425 off to the right, or off to our right, and a BR101, again without its cab car, off to the left. That's the other thing, is that German trains do generally run on the right-hand track, whereas here in New Zealand, when we get double-track sections, our trains use left-hand running, unless of course they're doing track maintenance that results in one of the tracks being shut. Now, what's that unit there? That's another BR422. That's the other thing, the BR422 wasn't actually new to Trainsim World when it was included with this route. In fact, and if I'm not mistaken, it has already been featured, or it had already been featured as part of the Rhein-Ruhr Osten Wuppertal to Hagen route. Actually, that's the other thing, is that I think Wuppertal to Hagen is one of the best German routes in TSW, even though it is actually shorter than the already short Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr. This tingly, this itch in my throat is kind of doing my head in. No, I don't think I'll try getting a screenshot of the 143 with the 422 in the background. Actually, something I forgot to mention, or at least I don't think I've mentioned it yet, is that on the other end of this train that we're driving is a cab car. And if you don't know what a cab car is, it's basically like think of a normal coach like this one, just with a cab at one end. And what it does is that it allows a passenger train to be run in like a push-pull service, or should I say a driver being able to drive equally well in both directions without having to uncouple the locomotive at each end of the line and run it around the train, because it saves a lot on like obviously track infrastructure and yeah, I guess fuel as well, especially if it's a diesel locomotive. What's that noise? Oh, it's you again. So, as we leave Essen, I believe, yeah, as you can see, there's lines curving off in all directions, but we will be taking this route along here. And we'll be speeding past Essen Kreis Süd station without stopping. That's a strange thing I've noticed, is that with Essen Kreis Süd, again, I apologise for butchering the pronunciation. From memory, there's only one service, or sorry, one scenario in which you actually do get to stop a train at that station. Always good to have some water with you. Yeah, so there's that one scenario where you get to stop at Essen Sud with I think the BR425, but curiously in timetable mode there are no, or at least from memory, there are no services that you can choose from that actually stop there. What's that sign? Or is that even a sign? No, I think that's just that. That's that same pair of BR422s that we keep seeing. This thing really does look like a big box. Just thought, I hope you can actually hear me clearly, even though I dare say some people might not want to. I've had a bit of trouble trying to sort out the audio levels and making sure I don't sound mute or like a very shy guy that's just whispering. Yeah, it has been a bit of a pain trying to sort that out. I was initially testing it with the Clinchfield Railroad F7As until I remembered how much I don't like that route. I don't think I'll go into detail about why I don't like Clinchfield route. But all I'll say is I don't like how it's shorter than the old Train Simulator version, which went from Elkhorn City to St Paul, but for whatever reason the TSW version only goes as far as Dante. And as an aside, I don't know if you've heard of it yet, but in the US, Amtrak themselves have very recently, might have only been yesterday for all I know, they've actually gone and done a vinyl wrap on one of their ACS 64 electric locomotives, and there's Essen Sud, and it's like in the old Phase 3 livery, which is similar to what the AEM 7s used to have, but it's also got an advertisement for TSW2, and I'm just thinking, like, it's pretty impressive that Amtrak, of all companies, has actually gone and done this essentially a mobile advertisement on one of their locomotives. But at the same time, I don't understand why they did it. I mean, for all I know, they're probably just trying to help raise awareness of it. And from what I've seen in like Amtrak's official Twitter posts, or some other article I read, the whole endeavour was actually sponsored by Dovetail Games and, by extension, the TSW2 brand. And what's even more impressive is that, from what I gather, Dovetail are going to be releasing a free update for the Boston Sprinter route, which will add this special livery. Well, the locomotive's number is 662, if I'm not mistaken. I keep getting that confused with 622, which is another ACS 64. But speaking of Boston Sprinter, I think that's one of the best US routes in TSW, even though, as always, there's a lot of room for improvement. The main reason I like that route as much as I do is partly because it includes the MBTA equipment, even though it's only a very small portion of the roster. I apologise for the awkward silence, but just having a somewhat hard time trying to think of something to say that is still relevant to TSW. And we're coming up on Wattenscheid. That's the other thing, I'm pretty sure in the German language they pronounce W's as V's. It's like one of the stations on line U6 of the Frankfurt U-Bahn is spelt W-E-S-T-E-N-D, all one word, and English speakers would know it as West End, or in Dire Straits' case, Wild West End. but I think I remember that hearing on the announcements that it is pronounced as West End. Didn't do too bad with the stopping there. This is the BR143/2, which comes with the main Spessartbahn alongside the BR185/2. And I was confused for a while, and I thought that the Deutsche Bahn Red version was... Oh, there they go. Good thing I hung around long enough for me to get screenshots. What was I just saying? Yes, that's something I've noticed that's a bit of a problem with me, is that quite often I tend to lose track of what I'm saying, and then go awkwardly silent for a little bit, and then start suddenly talking on a random subject. Speaking of random subjects, recently I've been rewatching all 6 episodes of this really bizarre American live action / puppet / animation kids program from 1987. The show is called Peppermint Park, and from what I understand, it was released direct to VHS. And it's understandable if you don't know what a VHS is. And actually, come to think of it, if I had a webcam on, I would probably go and get a VHS tape to show you all. But essentially, VHSs were how people watched DVD. No, not DVD. God, I'm an idiot. No, VHS. I don't know what that stands for, but they were like big. I think it was like 2 rolls of tape, 2 coils of tape inside a big plastic case, and yeah, they were like the predecessor, or the immediate predecessor for DVDs. And even then, come to think of it, even DVDs are now slowly going out of fashion, with thanks to Netflix and Hulu and Neon or Lightroom, or no, Lightroom's an Adobe thing. Speaking of which, this is something that I find genuinely surprising. You think about all these big online streaming platforms that we now have, as I say, Netflix is probably the most obvious example. If you go to a small town in New Zealand called Morrinsville, and if you go along I forget what the street's name is, but if you go along the same street where you see the warehouse on one side and the Countdown supermarket and a Mitre 10 hardware store on the right, on the same side as the warehouse, you'll see an old United Video store that is somehow still open, or at least it was when I was last there, which was November 16 this year, I believe. Yeah, it was, because I went out there to go and film DC 4853 again. But yeah, I can't quite believe that this old-fashioned and essentially now ancient form of, I don't know if retail is the right word, but I find it so odd that there's this ancient video rental store format that's still open in a small town in New Zealand, of all places. And come to think of it, I heard recently that Morrinsville was apparently the hometown of the current New Zealand Prime Minister. That's all I'll say about politics for now. But yeah, so I don't necessarily. What am I saying? So I say coming up on Bochum, but we're still a fair way off. That's the other thing. That's one of the other things I know about Germany, is that they use the metric system as their main form of measurement. And as far as I know, they don't use imperial units at all. What's that in the distance? There's a freight wagons and another locomotive. That looks like another BR185/2 with glitchy textures again. This station on the right is Bochum Ehrenfeld, if I'm not mistaken. It is, but I've probably got the pronunciation wrong yet again. And there's the cab car I was on about. So Bochum Ehrenfeld is one of those stations that is right next to the main line, but is only served by like the local S-Bahn trains. Another example of that sort of station would, I guess, be Dresden Freiburger Strasse, which is the first station north of Dresden Hauptbahnhof. But that station is only served by the S-Bahn Dresden S1 and S2 services, which go north to either Dresden Flughafen Airport or on the S1 service to Meißen-Trieberstal. And I've completely overshot the stopping point. I suppose it doesn't really matter too much. Right, well, that was a very short run indeed, and I can't help thinking that as unbearable as it was, me blabbering over the whole thing helped make it go by even faster. And here is yet another pair of BR422s. These units are actually, from memory, these units are actually quite interesting to drive. I mean, they're relatively easy, but it's just that the acceleration and braking is sometimes so rapid that it catches you off guard. Although at least it's got better brakes than the BR423 on the S-Bahn München system. And München is the German spelling of Munich. No, this is I forgot that you could walk right through the middle of the locomotive. I know you can do that on like Amtrak's ACS 64 and the DB BR182, and to some extent the Class 66 as well. But I don't. But yeah, I forgot that you could do that on BR143. And yeah, that just about wraps it up, methinks. So thank you for watching, and this has been a very short run from Duisburg to Bochum with the Deutsche Bahn BR143, and with any luck my next video will be about the MRCE BR185/5 on the Schnellfahrstrecke Köln route. Until then, I'll say goodbye and thank you for watching.